So, this is a bit of a ridiculous story, but as some of you may have already heard, Donald Trump, the president of the most powerful nation in the world, recently tweeted or posted an AI generated image of himself uh, dressed as the Pope. And as anyone with any common sense could have predicted, it generated a little bit of controversy. And I mostly only follow Catholics on Twitter, so that defined the reactions that I was seeing. And predictably, some were just, brushing it off. Some thought it was a funny joke, and some were extremely offended by it, referring to it as blasphemous and sacrilegious. And a lot of those reactions were probably just based on whether or not people happen to already like Donald Trump or not. If they do like him, then they would have just assumed it was an amusing joke. If they don't, they assumed this was an antagonistic provocation worthy of outrage. And then there were just a lot of people caught in the middle, probably not wanting to make a big deal out of it. As I read through the various replies and arguments, I found myself feeling a little bit disappointed because it seemed like all anyone was drawing from to inform their reaction was their emotions. It's just a question of intuition or vibes. How did it make them feel? And then they articulated those feelings as aggressively as possible. But that's a poor excuse for an approach to ethics. If the moral goodness of something is determined just by gut reaction, then resolution and reconciliation will only ever come by whoever has the strongest, loudest, and most persistent gut, I guess, which is a terrible way to evaluate the morality of something, not to mention a recipe for irreconcilable conflict. There's no way to build common ground between two or more people utterly committed to their emotional reaction to something, which is why it just becomes futile, because emotions can be wrong. I can be angry about something like, I don't know, like a funeral procession that is blocking traffic and preventing me from getting where I need to go. But that doesn't mean I'm in the right for being wrong. We should give right of way to funeral processions. My emotions in that case are misguiding me and competing with a reasonable response to that situation. And here's my biggest complaint is that Catholics should know better. We have this treasure chest of tools to draw from to evaluate the morality of a particular act or situation. So to watch Catholics just ignore those resources out of preference for their allegiance to their initial vibe-based reaction it's a sad sight to watch. And this is part of the reason there are so many endless online controversies and debates, even among Catholics. We aren't drawing from our own intellectual tradition to help us make sense of and resolve these kinds of controversies. And if we were, we would know that there are, in the case of moral acts, there are elements to look for, which are the object, the intentions, and the ends or the outcomes of the action. And if those three are good and or justified, then we know the act is good. And that's the basis from which we should judge moral actions. So what do those mean? Starting with the object, it's the moral content of the act itself. Is it something that can be justified or is appropriate in certain circumstances? If so, then you move on to the other two criteria to evaluate the act in question. But if the object is intrinsically evil, which means it's always wrong under all circumstances, then that ends your inquiry right there. You know it was immoral. Examples of that would be things like murder or adultery or blasphemy. But if the object is not intrinsically evil, then it depends on the other two, starting with intent. What does the person performing the act intend to accomplish by doing so? Because depending on what is intended, a good object can be made immoral. So for example, telling the truth is good. Most people can agree with that, right? But what if the truth I'm telling is like a juicy bit of gossip about someone designed to hurt their reputation? Well, now it's become immoral. Or what about sending someone a letter or a greeting card or something like that? There's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. But what if I do it to manipulate them? Or if I send it to someone who isn't my wife in the hope that I can build up their affection for an inappropriate relationship? Obviously, those intentions matter. It can also make a bad act much worse. For example, what if I misunderstood a work assignment and I didn't do a portion that was assigned to me? That's unfortunate, and I should have been more diligent in understanding the parameters of the project, but it's far less bad than if I went out of my way to avoid doing the work and then conspire to make it look like someone else was at fault for it not being done. I think an example that C.S. Lewis uses is, what if you're sitting on a bus or a train or something like that, and someone walking by you trips over your feet, and you didn't intend to trip them, you just had your feet sticking out? Well, that's bad, but it's nothing compared to if you deliberately trip them up. Okay, so lastly, the ends or the consequences of the act. If the object is justified and there's good intention behind it, if the effects are still bad, that can compromise the morality of the action. So for example, what if I decide to talk to someone, to correct their behavior in the hopes that I can help them do better in life, like a fraternal correction? So the object would be good, the intention is for their benefit, but then I end up doing it in front of a bunch of other people that then causes excessive embarrassment to the person in question. Or what if I decide to help somebody who's lost their job? So I agree to pay their bills for the foreseeable future. And as a result, they stop looking for work and become dependent upon my charity. Well, the object is good, the intent is good, but the ends are bad here, which should force me to reevaluate my support for this individual. Okay, so those are the parameters to use to evaluate the moral actions of somebody or yourself for that matter. So let's apply them to the question of Trump's actions, starting with the object. Is it intrinsically wrong to procure imagery or artwork portraying yourself in papal attire or papal vestments? Well, I sure hope not, because I did the exact same thing in a recent thumbnail for a video about the reforms I would seek if the church had the misfortune of my being elected pope. And I made that video, and especially that thumbnail, with my tongue squarely positioned in my cheek, which is to say, it was meant in good humor. And I didn't see a single comment or complaint from anyone as a result of that graphic. So obviously, I would hope the object can be moral. So then let's move on to the intent. Now, the problem with this situation is, as with any moral action judged merely from the outside, which is what all of us are doing, is that you can't really know the intention of the person doing it. You can't know it for sure. And this is a big reason why we should refrain from rash judgment of other people. We can't judge their hearts. We can only judge the object and sometimes the ends. But that isn't enough to decide whether someone has done something truly wrong in a lot of cases. And this is one of those cases. Maybe he was just trying to bring some brevity to the breathless speculation about the Pope's successor. Maybe he was poking fun at himself as someone who is obviously unfit for the office, and therefore it would be an absurd option so that we can all have a laugh at his expense. Maybe, or it might be the case that he thinks very highly of himself, so highly that he really thinks he should not only be the most powerful man in the political arena, but also in the ecclesiastical one. That's a possibility too. Maybe it was born out of a triumphalist motivation to see himself standing over the death of a political rival, and now he's gloating. Maybe those are the case, or maybe those are the possibilities as well. And here's the thing about intention, and especially if we're going to judge the moral actions of other people. Because his intentions might have been innocent or lighthearted, or they might have been evil, as Catholics, our obligation is to assume the best of someone. So if the information we have available to us is incomplete, as it is in this case, then we shouldn't jump to the worst possible conclusion. We should jump to the best one. Paragraph 2478 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church says this, quote, "To avoid rash judgment, everyone should be careful to interpret insofar as possible his neighbor's thoughts, words, and deeds in a favorable way." And then lastly, and I think this is where it's most relevant to this question, we can look at the consequences. Because the thing about the most powerful person in the world, when he says something or when he does something, the effects are extremely amplified and have the potential to do way more harm than if someone like myself does it. Furthermore, you're representing an entire nation. You're its spokesperson, which means you should be very cautious with the way you employ something like humor, because humor can be received in a lot of different ways. You aren't standing around in a circle with your friends where you might get some inside humor. You're broadcasting it to the entire world on behalf of the most powerful country in the world. I would say that you owe it to the people that you represent and to the dignity of your office not to be overly impulsive or foolhardy in anything you do. And in this case, I'd say, he probably crossed the line. It's obviously going to have the potential to offend people, especially at a time in which they are mourning the loss of their previous pope, who isn't just like an institutional leader. He's like a spiritual father. Knowing that this would be controversial, and I don't think you can get away with the claim that you didn't know it was going to be controversial, I'd say that it needlessly provokes people and upsets what little peace already exists in society at a time in which polarization and civil animosity feel like they're at an all-time high. And for what benefit, really? A bit of a laugh for the few people who think it's funny? So I just don't think that the benefit is really worth all the risks that it imposes. So on those grounds, I think that it was at best imprudent. And of all the people I saw react to it, I thought Bishop Barron's was the most fitting, who said something like, he thought it was a joke that didn't land well and probably should have been left unsaid. Which, given what the Catechism says about judging our neighbor's deeds in a favorable way, I think that's the right take. It doesn't draw needless attention to it. It addresses the fact that it's worthy of criticism, but it also doesn't descend into hysterics and pearl clutching, which makes Catholics look fragile, if you're asking me. If we're all sent into like a frenzy over something, nobody will remember a week from now because some other outrage will have caught our attention. So we really shouldn't let ourselves get so upset all the time at every provocation. And if we want to be an example to the rest of the world, especially with the aims of attracting them to the faith, to the evangelistic aims of the church, we need to get thicker skin and be more measured in how we react to things like this, and to how we make moral judgments. We need to make them based on the tools that are available to us, that come to us from our intellectual tradition. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope it's okay if I just switch gears here for a second, because it's no secret that big tech companies tend to support causes that are antithetical to life and the family, and yet we find it nearly impossible not to use their products and services. So if you're gonna own one of these things, why not support a carrier that is committed to the cause of life in the family? Which is why I support Charity Mobile, who sends 5% of your monthly plan price to a charity that supports the causes of life in the family. They've been offering solid peace of mind services for nearly 30 years and have never raised plan prices. All their plans start under $50 before taxes and surcharges, including their unlimited plan. So if you're interested in that, visit their website to get a transparent estimate of your monthly bill. And if you use promo code Brian, you'll get a free phone with free activation and free shipping. Just visit CharityMobile.com/Brian.